Hello, welcome to my channel, another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and this is week 4 of New Worlds November, created by the Bookish Bryants. I am a co-host with a bunch of other co-hosts. I will leave them all listed in the description, so you can check them out. They are all excellent channels, and you should watch them. So this is AI Robots Week, where we are encouraged to read short stories or short novels under 250 pages about robots or AI. And I have read 2 stories. Both are from the Big Book of Science Fiction, edited by Anne and Jeff Vandermeer. The first story I read was The Last Question by Asimov, published in 1956. And this is a fascinating little story. It does not have a lot of consistent characters. It's an idea story. And it starts off with 2 computer programmers in the future. And they're working on this gigantic computer that supposedly can answer any question that you ask it. And they start talking about entropy and what happens to the universe, because this computer has just created basically a ring of solar panels to go around the earth that will provide limitless energy for humanity's needs. But one of the men says, it's really not limitless, because someday the sun will burn out and not be able to give energy. And the other guy was going, oh, that's so far in the future, you don't have to worry about that. And he goes, well, we do have to worry about that, because not only will our sun burn out, but eventually all suns will burn out. It will be the heat death of the universe. Now, Isaac Asimov does not mention it as the heat death of the universe. That's a more modern terminology that I'm just throwing into that short story. But they're worried about entropy. So they ask the computer, is there a way around entropy? And I don't get the quote exactly right, but basically, computer responds, not enough information for a valid answer. And then it goes more into the future, and humanity has expanded further into the stars. And another set of people ask the same question, and they get the same answer. And it continues on to the story until it gets further and further and further into the future. Billions of years, trillions of years. And then entropy is happening. Now, the problem I have with this story is the very end. I love the premise because I love the idea of entropy. I love the idea of the heat death of the universe. That is a fate that we will encounter long, long, long after I am dead. But it is the fate of our future. And the end of the story is kind of ridiculous. It is not the product of a scientific mind. But still, it is one of the great classics of science fiction and well worth everyone reading. The second one I read was Good News from the Vatican by Robert Silverberg, published in 1971. And this is supposedly a satire. This is Robert Silverberg talking about, will a robot be elected pope? And there's a lot of discussion about people saying, how can we have a robot pope that will encourage more robots to join the Catholic Church, that will encourage more humans to leave the Catholic Church? And they go on, and it's a story about electing a pope. Now, I'm not a Catholic, so I sort of look at this with outsider's eyes. And yes, the whole process of electing a pope, to my heretical eyes, my heretical feelings, because I'm not religious, I'm not Catholic, is a total cluster. And Silverberg's making fun of that process. And why should you not have a robot be pope? They can think. They can believe just as well as humans. I I don't think it works as a satire. It just part of this is just not funny. That's the problem. It's just not a funny story, because I think he's poking fun at the Catholic Church, but he's poking fun of it a way you would poke fun at a cripple walking down the street, not able to walk correctly because the Catholic Church is burdened with this obsolete process of picking popes and who could be a pope. So I really didn't like it, but it's about robots. And those are my first two stories for week 4. More to come. I have read 3 more stories for the final week of New Worlds November for robots and AI. And the first one was my favorite of the week, and that is Wang's Carpets by Greg Egan. I read it from the Hard SF Renaissance, now edited by David G. Hartwell and Kathryn Cramer. And Greg Egan is a Australian computer scientist who also writes science fiction stories. And this is a story set in the future. All the characters are post-human, which means they don't have physical bodies. They are intelligence running on a computer system. And they are sent out to investigate the galaxy, because investigating the galaxy is slow going. They don't have faster than light travel. So travel between planets can take an awfully long time, and communication back and forth to Earth takes a very long time. And their mission is to seek out the universe and hopefully discover alien life, and especially alien intelligent life. So these they call it simulations, or I'll just call them post-humans. These post-humans are investigating this planet, and this planet has this odd configuration of biological material, which just looks like pieces of material just floating through an ocean. And they eventually call them Wang's Carpets because of an ancient Earth mathematician. The only problem is that when they start investigating these carpets, if you look at it in normal 3-dimensional space, they're just these carpets floating around in an ocean. But when you look at them in 16 dimensions, then something absolutely marvelous is discovered. I'll let you discover what's in the story. But that's only part of it. Part of it is Egan's description of a post-human society, what it would be like to live as a computer intelligence. You have a fully functioning consciousness, but you do not have a physical body. But you can give representations of the body. Those representations don't necessarily have to be humanoid or close. You can make them close to humanoid or far from humanoid. It's whatever you want them to be. And that's what I found so utterly engaging in this story is Egan's vision of the post-human society. Absolutely fabulous, this story, and I highly recommend it. The next one is kind of a stretcher for robots and AI. It has a computer in the story, and the computer is very important, but it's not really artificial intelligence, and it's not really a robot. So kind of a stretcher, but it is one of the greatest stories in science fiction. And that is The 9 Billion Names of God by Arthur C. Clarke. And in this story, Tibetan monks are buying what would have then been the supercomputer, because those monks exist to tabulate all the possible names of God, which I think is about 9 billion. And that is a very slow task for Tibetan monks to do by hand. It would take many, many, many years. But a supercomputer, that can do it in a month. So the Tibetan monks buy a supercomputer. Now, as I said, one of the greatest short stories in science fiction ever written. But the ending, even though so famous, is not a scientific ending. It's a very human end to a story, and it would fit with our mythologies. But like the last question by Asimov, it's just not a scientific ending to a short story. And the third, once again, came from this book, the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Volume 1. And that was Helen O'Loy by Lester Del Rey. And this is a story, let me tell you when it was exactly published. It was published, I believe, in the 30s. And it is the story of two men who, they're bachelors, and they want to have robot servants in their home, and they have a robot servant named Lena. And Lena is sort of a flaky robot. She doesn't quite understand what it's like to be human and what humans want. So when she's cooking for them, she doesn't understand like garnishes of salt on food. So these men are disappointed, and they decide to spend their cash to buy the newest and best robot they can get. And that is the Helen of Troy model. And she's a beautiful robot made of rubber and circuits, but can fool people into thinking that she's a human. And so they buy this robot, thinking they're just going to have a nice house servant. Things get complicated because the robot watches what would be soap operas on what would be television and starts reading romance novels. And she gets an idea of what it would be like to be a human woman. Now, the only problem is, I just looked this up. This book was written or published in 1938. And its view of women is extremely outdated. Modern women reading this are going, no way, that's not me. But yeah, that's kind of what women were like back then, maybe. Or maybe what a science fiction author would think a woman should be like. But anyway, it gets complicated for these men and this robot that can fool people into thinking that she's human. Science is outdated. Circuits and rubber on a robot just feels outdated to me. But back then, it would have been a marvel. It is a very sentimental story. It pulls at the heartstrings at the end. It's out to discover what it is and what it means to be a human. And can an artificial intelligence fall in love? Or could you fall in love with an artificial intelligence? It's a great story. Old, outdated, but it was a lot of fun to read. And that is the end of New Worlds November. I want to thank the Bookish Bryants for creating this event and inviting me to be a co-host. I want to thank all my co-hosts for being part of this event and making it an exceptionally intriguing month for reading science fiction. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.